Hi everybody, this is Viewpoint Libertarian. This is a response to a video by Wrecking Machine entitled Why I'm Not a Libertarian. The link to the video is posted in the description if you would like to watch, but I will summarize his main contentions in this video. First of all, he says good things about libertarianism such as the protection of civil liberties and personal freedoms and the desire to keep states from sliding towards dictatorships, but he has basically four contentions against libertarianism. I will address these contentions, and one thing to mention quickly is that the maker of the original video is from, I believe, the United Kingdom, and I am from the United States, so specific examples that I give will relate to circumstances and companies in the United States, but the main principles are entirely applicable to the UK as well. His first contention is, just as government needs to be kept in check, the free market needs to be kept in check. This contention exhibits an unawareness of the natural checks and balances that are present in a purely free, unregulated market. I will get into how businesses currently are able to abuse consumers in a minute. In a purely free market, businesses are driven by the profit and loss system. The only way a business can make a profit and survive is if it pleases its customers. Consumers will purchase products and services from the businesses that offer products at the highest quality and lowest price. Consumers have the final say, and businesses must work to please them in order to stay open and make a profit. If a business offers a product or service that is more expensive or of lesser quality than the consumers want, the business will suffer losses. If the business does not change its ways and begin to please consumers, it will go into bankruptcy. But this is a good thing, for the inefficient, abusive company will no longer be able to abuse its customers, and its assets will be bought up by thriving businesses that please their customers and are well managed. If a business displeases its customers, they can simply go somewhere else. The free market functions well because it is built on choice and voluntary exchange. Additionally, the profit and loss mechanism guides businesses into the most urgent and efficient methods of production. If the profits for a good or service are high, then businesses will rush into this sector and produce and sell in order to take advantage of the high profits. However, this increase from new businesses and the supply of the good that consumers so desperately want consequently lowers its price, thereby aiding the consumer. Inversely, if losses are incurred over a specific good, businesses are oversupplying a good that consumers don't urgently need, and businesses will redirect their operations to an area that will help to please the consumer's more urgent wants. In a sentence, in a free market, consumers are not beholden to businesses, businesses are beholden to consumers. The government, or as I often say, the state, is the opposite. The state is built on taxation, which is coercion, and monopoly. Its coerced consumers have nowhere else to go, and the state does not operate according to profit and loss, since its revenues are forcibly taken from the populace, and has no way to determine efficiency. That is the fundamental and insurmountable difference between the state and the free market. Voluntary exchange of the free market versus forced compliance of the state. You might think that many businesses currently abuse their customers and make enormous mistakes, and you are entirely correct. In our present day, the benefits of a free market are often reversed by statist intervention. Wall Street banks, who engaged in reckless business practices and should be punished by the market, are bailed out and rewarded for their imprudence. In fact, it was the US government that made it possible for the Wall Street banks to gamble with unseemly amounts of money in the first place. The Federal Reserve, a creation of Congress established by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, prints money out of thin air and gives it to Wall Street banks to encourage borrowing and investment. Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan flooded the market with money beginning in 2001, which fueled the housing boom, which was simply a bubble that eventually burst and led us into our current crisis. Of course, there were also pieces of governmental legislation such as the Community Reinvestment Act, which forced banks to make riskier mortgage loans to low-income people who normally could not qualify due to their risk. In 1998, AccuBank Mortgage was fined $2.1 billion for not complying. There were also government-sponsored entities, GSEs, including Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that packaged and sold trillions of dollars of what turned out to be toxic assets related to the housing market. In 2008, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had owned or guaranteed about half of the US's $12 trillion mortgage market. What's worse, the bailouts of all these institutions by the US government is an obvious wealth transfer from the poor and middle class to wealthy bankers to the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars. The recent housing and financial crash of the United States is a perfect example of distortion and manipulation of the market by the state. Far too often, perverse and harmful actions that spring up from statist intervention is mistaken for a free market. Our current corporatist system, where the state favors certain corporations and businesses with printed money, bailout subsidies, and special tax breaks, creates many problems. Our corporatist system is no free market. All right, second contention, finally. Allowing businesses to segregate and discriminate based on racism is barbaric. First of all, let me say that I agree that it is barbaric for somebody to be a racist and refuse to serve customers due to racism, but it is not barbaric to allow it. I'm a libertarian and I think that if a person owns a business like a restaurant, she can decide to not serve a customer if she so chooses, which means a racist restaurant owner has the freedom to not serve black customers or Jewish customers or redheads or whomever. People often assume then that libertarians harbor racist sympathies. Let me explain why this isn't the case. Nearly everybody, including libertarians, believe that we all have a right to free speech. Additionally, nearly everybody, including libertarians, believes that racist or prejudicial speech, although wrong, should be allowed and even protected. Most everybody disagrees with racist speech, but still believes that people have a right to it and should not be denied it. Libertarians apply the same freedom associated with free speech to property rights. According to the libertarian, people may misuse free speech, but they should not be denied it. Analogously, people may misuse their property rights, but they should not be denied them. I think a racist person should be allowed to refuse service to a Jew or Hispanic or whomever, even though I find the practice entirely abhorrent. And conversely, I think an African American or a Jewish person should be free to not serve a person who is a high-profile Ku Klux Klan member. Furthermore, with the entire civil rights issue in the US, government was a huge part of the problem. The Southern state governments enacted the Jim Crow laws, which enforced segregation and racist policies from the end of the Civil War to the 1960s. Libertarians would never support a state government enacting racist laws. That's a perfect example of governmental abuse against its people, telling them to go to certain drinking fountains and ride on certain parts of city buses because of their race. I would like to get into how the market punishes racist businesses, but there's not enough time. I'll say quickly that, obviously, if a business turns away customers, it loses business, and its non-prejudicial competitors will happily receive those customers and their dollars and perform better than the prejudicial business. Another thing mentioned by Wrecking Machine in the same strain was equal pay. To explain the push for equal pay, there is a gap between the genders when it comes to wages and salaries earned. The famous quote is that women earn 77 cents of every dollar that men do. Many claim that sexism is to be blamed and that the state should mandate equal pay between genders. Let's consider if that assertion were true, that for the exact same work, women earn 77 cents compared to a dollar for men. If I owned a business, I would immediately fire all my male employees and hire all women. My labor costs would be much cheaper that way. Of course, I wouldn't be the only business who would do this, and soon enough, women would be in such high demand by businesses that their salaries and wages would rise until they equaled or surpassed the wages and salaries of men. Of course, this hasn't happened, and there are enough women in managerial positions that would have no problem hiring women, so the problem must lie elsewhere. Well, a study in the United States, which I'll provide a link to, shows that women who are single and do not have children earn 8% more than their male counterparts. And by the way, should there be laws that strive for equal pay for single childless men? Of course not, that's just silly. The reason why women start making less than men when they become married and have children is because that's when they start taking time off work. In the technology sector, which changes rapidly, a year or more out of the industry will set you back. It's an unfortunate result of biology. There are many things I could say about gender and racial quotas and the like and how they would distort labor markets and efficiency and actually hurt the very people they're trying to help, but there's not enough time. So we have to move on to the third contention. Businesses will take advantage of employees and abuse them as much as possible. We need things like the minimum wage. Unfortunately, there's not enough time in this video to get into the minimum wage, so I will instead have to direct you to an article which focuses on a real-life example of the horrendous impact of the minimum wage on low-skilled workers, specifically the raise in the minimum wage in American Samoa, which had devastating consequences for the residents of the island. Here's the link. Wrecking Machine mentioned that he heard someone say the minimum wage was racist and that he couldn't understand why, and I'll explain that quickly. The people who are most priced out of the labor market and can't find work because of the minimum wage in the US are poor black teenagers who have the least skills because they go to lousy inner city public schools. The minimum wage, then, while not racist in intent, has what some would call racist effects. Here's a second article on that. Please, please read these two articles. The minimum wage is such a harmful policy, and these two articles do a great job explaining why. Okay, fourth and final issue. Anti-pollution laws from government are necessary. The problem with pollution from a libertarian perspective is a lack of enforcement of property rights. In a libertarian society, people, of course, have property rights, and if someone violates your property rights by polluting your property, you have the right to sue them so they stop damaging your property. So if there is a neighborhood which enjoys clean air and then a factory is set up and begins spewing out smoke, the members of that neighborhood can sue the factory owner for violating their property and can be compensated. Of course, it is not profitable for the factory owner to pay out large sums of money to the neighborhood, so he will have to move to a location where he doesn't pollute and damage anyone's property. The same applies to a river. A river could be owned in part or in whole, and if a company pollutes a river, the owner or owners of the river can sue the polluter. Of course, if somebody wants to, she can buy up a piece of land and pollute the hell out of it, and that's called a landfill, which serves a very important economic need. She would just have to be careful not to pollute anyone else's property and thereby be subject to an expensive lawsuit. And I should mention that people have an incentive to take care of their own property. Because if you own a ranch, for example, and your ranch is run down and polluted, it's worthless and you can't sell it. It is better for you to take care of your property so that it retains or gains value, so that it is an asset and not a liability. Governments, of course, own millions of acres of land and can't keep track of it all. And furthermore, there is no one person who suffers a loss if the land becomes run down. It's a term common in economics called the tragedy of the commons. Look it up if you like. Currently, the government gives out pollution permits and allows companies to pollute, which is, of course, a political process that favors the politically connected, which seems quite a bit worse for the environment than property rights enforcement. I have to end it here. I hope I've addressed the bulk of Wrecking Machine's misgivings, but of course, because of time, I haven't been able to mention everything. To all my fellow libertarians, please be polite and civil when talking with someone, even if they are nasty to you. We don't need to be a source of rudeness and obnoxiousness. It only sets us back. People listen and are engaged so much more easily when you are polite and kind. Please comment if you have a question or something to add. Thanks for watching. So long.